Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Thank you so much. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Balance of Power, the early edition on a Tuesday. Bloomberg Radio, satellite radio, channel 121. And you can watch the radio on TV by going to Bloomberg Originals or to YouTube. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. For this program or all of our shows that come from Washington and New York throughout the day. It's the coolest thing. I've said this before that we've got going. You can pause it. You can back it up when you want to hear exactly what Peter Navarro just said. He was speaking yesterday, in a big day yesterday. The optics in geopolitics were striking. Putin, Modi, that alone is an item. Add President Xi, and you've got quite a story here. They were shaking hands, they were hugging, they were laughing. And a striking answer to the summit that we saw in Alaska. Peter Navarro, the president's trade advisor, was out at the sticks in the White House driveway talking about trade with India. You know, we are now looking at a 50% tariff on India. And the last time we spoke with Peter here in this studio, it was unclear whether we were actually still in talks with India, having seen negotiations break down. That's what he had to say in the driveway at the White House yesterday. Listen.
It was a shame to see Modi getting in bed as the leader of the biggest democracy in the world with the two biggest authoritarian dictators in the world, in Putin and Xi Jinping. That doesn't make any sense.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, the Eurasian Security Grouping, met on Monday alongside the heads of state from these other countries, which is why we found this remarkable collection of people. And it's brought a really great piece of reporting to the terminal here as we look at the big picture with questions about redrawing the geopolitical map as we know it. China's Xi redraws geopolitical map with embrace of Putin and Modi. Adam Ferrer covers all of this for a living at Bloomberg Economics, where he is senior geoeconomics analyst for the Asia Pacific. It's great to see you. Welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend.
Yeah, good to be here.
Because we're trying to understand really what's happening here, the redrawing of geopolitical lines. It was only a couple of days ago, Peter Navarro sat here and referred to Modi's war, remembering that the 25% that was added on here to bring it to 50 was punishment for India buying Russian oil. Now we find them together in a literal embrace. Did the U.S. push India there?
So the imagery was stark as you've walked through, not only individually between Modi and President Xi of China, but obviously President Putin of Russia, hand in hand, talking, laughing. President Modi, or Prime Minister Modi, also took a ride, and President
he got an hour in the limousine.
In the limo.
Putin wanted to top Trump on that, right? They only got 5 minutes in the piece.
That's right. Potentially. I mean, what's clear is that Modi is demonstrating his freedom of action, his own autonomy, and the fact that India has other choices out there, not just the United States. And the timing of this summit, which has obviously been on the books for a long period of time, gave him that opportunity to demonstrate that there were other options. Now, to be clear, though, the scope of his discussions with both Russia and China were far more limited than the pictures would let us believe, particularly when we look at China, a country that Indian soldiers have actually gone to blows with as recently as just a few years ago, that has deep structural problems in their relationship, deep concerns about competition that China has about India's growing economy, and India's concern about China dominating its economy and limiting its autonomy in the region, both as a security partner and as an economic entity. And so with that in mind, this was a tactical shift on Modi's part, not a strategic shift in terms of realignment with President Xi in the long term. And when we look at the announcements, actually the substance of what came out of this, we saw very little. Right? We saw talk of returning to direct flights between China and India. We saw some discussion of smaller levels of border trade, but that's the level that we're talking about. Despite those pictures, there's still a lot to do. And with Russia, we saw a much friendlier relationship, right? Putin and Modi see themselves as strategic partners and have for some time. Modi was demonstrating directly, a pushback against the White House, that he could still have his relationship and that he was going to continue to buy oil and trade with Moscow. And all of that designed for both the domestic audience and for those in Washington to understand that they can't push him around.
Well, it's really interesting that the White House was having this conversation last week ahead of this taking place. And I want to go back to what Peter Navarro said here on the program when he was referring to India purchasing Russian oil to the benefit of Moscow and its war machine in Ukraine. Here's what he said.
Everybody in America loses because of what India is doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because India's high tariffs cost us jobs and factories and income and higher wages. And then the taxpayers lose because we got to fund Modi's war.
We've got to fund Modi's war. What role, just backing away a little bit from the specifics of what he just said, is the war in Ukraine playing in this relationship?
So the reality for Modi is that Ukraine is not front of mind, right? He's thinking about...
It's a non sequitur.
It's a separate discussion.
But people see them laughing and shaking hands thinking that, these bad guys were funding the war. Prime Minister Modi is simply looking for the cheapest oil for as many people as he can. Is it as simple as that? How about President Xi?
So for both of them, oil prices are important, right? I mean, it makes up a large portion of their need. Both of them are very dependent on energy imports. And as you said, for Modi, this is about cheap oil. It is about a broader strategic relationship with a key defense partner in Russia. But Modi has tried to work his way in the middle, maintaining a strong relationship and developing a relationship with Ukraine and Russia, and even trying at times to push for that peace agreement, but not risking his own political capital to do so. Beijing is in a very different position, right? Following Russia's broader invasion of Ukraine, Beijing stepped in to support Moscow as Western sanctions really started to cripple the economy and has now become its primary and principal economic and security partner globally. And so this meeting with President Xi and President Putin was yet another moment for them to highlight that relationship isn't changing and that they're going to continue to grow what has become a over $250 billion trading relationship and a key lifeline for Moscow as it continues to conduct its war in Ukraine.
I've only got a minute, Adam, but I'm just wondering what happened to your phone, what happened at your desk on Friday a little after 5 o'clock when the appeals court ruled along with the International Trade Court to say that most all of Donald Trump's tariff regime is illegal.
So I think this didn't catch many of us by surprise. Based on the arguments that were put forward before, there was an understanding that the court was likely to rule that the president exceeded his authority under IEEPA to put these tariffs in place.
Ruling.
That said, across our, people we're talking to and what we're hearing from, other global partners is that there's an expectation that Trump is committed to these tariffs, that he's going to find a way to get those tariffs in place, whether it's through IEEPA or through a variety of other mechanisms.
So just replace the emergency and it's a different conversation.
Yeah, but that said, uncertainty looms large again, right?
Well,
while tariffs might come back, at what rate? On what goods and how will they be implemented? So, and throw on top of that this question of whether they'd have to refund all of the tariffs that brought in. And, there's some really big questions left with
may not want to be spending that money right now. Adam, it's great to see you. Thank you so much. It's always a smart conversation with Adam Farrar, Bloomberg Economics. And it's exactly what Adam was just talking about, the uncertainty. The very reason we wanted to talk to Christine Aquino, managing editor for Bloomberg Markets Live blog. This is the person who's got the minute-by-minute breakdown on stock trading. And the last time I looked, we were pretty close to our lows of the session here. We woke up with a 500-point decline right out of the gate on the Dow. The S&P 500 is down almost 100 points, 1.5%. Christine, uncertainty is the word here? Because you'd think that tariffs going away might make the market happy, but the fact is we don't know again.
Absolutely, Joe. Again, markets are back in limbo, and that is ultimately what they're allergic to when it comes to all of these policy developments, right? I mean, the impact of the policy is one thing, but just questions over how it's going to be implemented, when it's going to be implemented, and now whether it's going to be implemented, given the questions over the legality of all of this. I mean, this is exactly the type of stuff that investors don't like to see, and this is exactly what we're seeing. And combined with the seasonal weakness that we do tend to see in markets in September, it really just makes for a recipe for bad news. And this is exactly what we're seeing in both stock and bond markets today.
I'm glad you mentioned the seasonality. So tell our listeners and viewers what we might be in for here, because you've got a market that some would suggest is priced for perfection, certainly one that's near record highs. And we just learned a lot in what's at least left of this earnings reporting season. Are we begging for a little correction here?
It certainly seems that way, Joe. Yeah, absolutely. Just because, as you mentioned, stocks enter September priced for perfection. And we already got some whispers, for instance, of some of the big themes, right, that have been driving equities in the first 8 months of the year. That is still that AI tech theme. But we did get a signal from NVIDIA that growth in that space will be moderating over the next few years. I mean, and it's inevitable that it can't just keep growing at a record pace year after year. And so there's that realization at a time when the valuations, even though they've come down from record highs, are still pretty lofty. And then you add in uncertainty over what's going to happen to the Federal Reserve, both in terms of its personnel and also the policy meeting that we're going to see on September 17th. Is there going to be a rate cut? Or if not, what the rate path looks like for the rest of the year. Throw all of these in together, and this is what we get for a September back-to-school reality check.
Oh, you had to remind me. I know. Do you feel like it's back to school today? It's not like we weren't at work already, but I feel like I'm stressed out to go back to work and school. How about this Bank of America call? This is something else, considering the backdrop that you just painted, Christine, in our remaining moment. The S&P 500 to hit 9,914 by September 27, 52% higher from these levels. What are they drinking at B of A?
Listen, they're obviously drinking optimism juice over there, and I would like some if that's possible. But again, there will always be equity bulls in this market. That's never going to be a shortage. But perhaps what we're seeing is just a short-term correction. It really remains to be seen. But every time we do see something like this, there will always be people willing to buy.
Well, I guess so. I'll take what they're having. Pass the optimism juice around up there in New York. Christine, it's great to have you. Come on more often. Christine Aquino, managing editor for the Bloomberg Markets Live blog that you rely on every day. We'll assemble our panel next. They're back together, Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis off the long weekend, and only here on Bloomberg.
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, and this is Balance of Power. Alongside Kriti Gupta here in the nation's capital, in for Kaylee Lyons. As we turn our attention to domestic politics, Kriti, we've been talking so much about the potential for National Guard troops or federal law enforcement to enter Chicago has been the next city that President Trump has highlighted here. Of course, they're on the streets of Washington, D.C. He's suggested other cities like New York might get that treatment next. All of this, of course, began in Los Angeles a couple of months ago.
And at the time, even when he was threatening Los Angeles, no one really took it that seriously. This was an unthinkable move in terms of troops, in terms of actually the legalities around it. And now we find out, well, it's actually not legal to do that.
Well, we did get a court ruling that's going to raise some real questions about going into other cities. The president has a lot of leeway here in Washington, D.C., in the federal city. It's not like that when you go into another state with an executive that actually is the commander-in-chief of the National Guard. So here we are, the judge ruling here that the president's deployment in L.A., this was in June, against the immigration crackdown, violated federal law with much to wonder about the way forward. We assemble our political panel. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are both with us, Bloomberg Politics contributors here on the Tuesday edition. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Jeannie, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center and Bloomberg Politics contributor. You know, one thing, Jeannie, that Donald Trump has always said since he got back in the White House is that he will comply with court orders. Could this slow down the role of National Guard troops, if not federal law enforcement in other parts of the country?
You know, it absolutely could, but I'll tell you, I am doubtful that it is going to slow down this administration, and I'll tell you why. Very much like his imposition of the tariffs, which is something he has talked about almost his entire adult life. He has been fixated on violence in Chicago for much of his life. He built the Trump Tower there. He has talked about it since before he ran for election the first time, continued right through to the current moment, I think as early as today, if I'm reading my Truth Social right. So I'm not sure this is going to slow him down. The other thing is that we also have a Supreme Court decision just earlier, a few months ago, in which they said they won't allow federal district court judges to impose nationwide injunctions, which raises the question, is Judge Breyer's ruling just for his district, or does it apply nationwide? So as much as I would like to think this may slow things down so we could get a real decision out of the Supreme Court, I'm not sure it's going to slow down this administration.
Rick, weigh in here. Do you agree with Jeannie on that point? Does this serve as some sort of deterrent when it comes to other cities across the United States? Or at the end of the day, could this simply be just something that happens months after the actual action of putting troops in those cities? How do you view it?
Yeah, Critty, I think this is exactly what Trump is looking for. He wants to test the legal boundaries of a very powerful presidency, and he's done it in various ways, and this is just one of the most current ways that he has said, sue me. I'm going to deploy these troops. I'm going to stake out an emergency. I'm going to take the powers that the Constitution gives me and exert them. It would not surprise. And then, by the way, take me to the Supreme Court, where he's running a pretty good track record right now. And so I have no doubts that there are voices inside the White House saying, great, this is exactly what we planned. You know, we want to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. If we are given the authority by the Supreme Court to deploy National Guard troops anywhere we want for basically any reason we want, this is what they're looking for. They want that carte blanche, and they want it within the first year of their presidency. So I think we see this playing out exactly the way they wanted it.
Well, Donald Trump on Truth Social, to your point, Jeannie, today, this is just a couple of hours ago, at least 54 people, he writes, were shot in Chicago over the weekend. 8 people were killed. The last 2 weekends were similar. The president writes, Chicago is the worst and most dangerous city in the world. And I'm looking at a list of cities by homicide rate. The first American city that appears on the list is, in fact, New Orleans, and that's at position 28. It is followed by Memphis and a few others here. Before you get that far down the list, Jeannie, it's pretty much all in Mexico or in Central America. The president doesn't actually think Chicago is the most dangerous city in the world, I presume, right?
Not if he is looking at the data, but as we know, he is not fond of looking at data. He is fond of finding data or creating his own reality and talking about it. And he very much believes that Chicago is violent. And we should not underestimate the fact that 54 shootings over a weekend of Labor Day is stunning. It is violent. It needs to be addressed. The problem here is, as this federal judge said, the president doesn't have the power under the Comitatus Act to do this. It is an overreach of his power. He does not have the ability to set up a nationwide police force as it is under his power. And so that is the problem for Donald Trump, which is why I think last week in that long extended cabinet meeting that you sat through, Joe, he said, you know, I want to be invited in. And of course, he's not going to be invited in either by Mayor Johnson or by the governor. But it is very much in keeping, to Rick's point, with what the Republican administration here has been really wanting to do, not just to address crime, which they think is a winning issue for them, but immigration as well.
Jeannie, from a state rights perspective, we know that the mayor of Chicago has been very vocal about just how welcome those troops would be. What more can they do, Chicago and other cities across the country?
Well, they are going to have to read carefully this federal judge's decision. I think, if the president does send troops in uninvited, they will take him to court and follow that. We heard the mayor of Chicago say that his police force would not cooperate with law enforcement. There are other more moderate Democrats and Republicans saying maybe the governor and the mayor should try to work with the president to address crime. But I just don't see that in the offing, in part because of the politics of this thing, because we know that Pritzker, just like Newsom, has designs on the White House himself potentially, and so this does give him a way to make a national forum for him to take his case to Americans beyond Illinois.
Well, Rick, you wonder if the president is going to need to rewrite the sort of baseline foundation, the real motivation for using these troops, not unlike the ruling on tariffs. If he can rewrite the tariff emergency and create another reason to keep the tariffs in place, certainly he can find another reason to put National Guard troops in different cities in America, correct? This is something they've likely gamed out at the White House already, no?
Sure. At a minimum, they have already been saying that they're using the National Guard troops to support the immigration plans, which means that you have federal troops supporting the function of a federal law enforcement officer, which actually gives him better standing, within the legal system. There'll always be a reason for this administration to try to do what they're going to do. They're extremely good at finding cause and effect. And even the president's comments on Truth Social this morning about these 54 shootings, you don't have to be ranked number one. It's always an overgrasp for him. But most people would look at that and go, wow, that's a dangerous place if 54 people were shot at, in Chicago this weekend. And so he does play on the fears of people when they say these things. And of course, then he always takes it a little bit too far. But the reality is, I don't think he is going to suffer the desire to find a reason to do it. He's just going to execute upon the path that he even talked about doing during the campaign. He said he was going to put these troops in these cities, and yet people voted for him. Now, when you look at the polls, you see that there's little support for putting National Guard troops in a law enforcement position in these cities. So I would say the really only thing that can control this is the bad political effect that may take place because of it.
Rick, I'm going to ask you maybe a very obvious question here, but are there any Republican cities that could be on the radar of the Trump administration right now?
Oh, well, there should be. In other words, if you're making the argument that these are dangerous cities, I think 3 of the top 5 are in red states as far as crime goes. And so, but that's not what this is about. This is about politics. It's got nothing to do with crime fighting. Donald Trump isn't going to deploy National Guard troops in these states without a close cooperation with the governor, and probably more likely a border state dealing with border issues like he's done in the past. So, we pretend sometimes to say that these arguments that are made in public policy realms are legitimate. This is politics directing policy, not the other way around.
Yeah, we've heard of a couple that they might be looking at, including the aforementioned Memphis, and the administration has suggested that, yes, it will be looking in those areas. Question from a terminal user here, Jeannie, with regard to Chicago. He writes, we could hate Trump for going to Chicago, but the city's been a mess for decades. What is the counter from local officials?
I think that's a great question. And this is where I mentioned before, you do have some voices on moderates on both the Democratic and Republican side saying, hold on, let's work together. Why doesn't the governor invite the president in? But to be clear that he can't just come in without being invited, and they have to have a plan as to what they're going to do to combat crime, hiring more police officers, better training, all the things that we could do to address these issues. Because to the terminal user's point, Chicago has been violent, as have many cities for a long time. The problem here is that Chicago, if you're really looking at the data, is not nearly the most violent city. And of course, you just mentioned Memphis. The Tennessee governor sent National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. when two of his own cities are far more violent than Washington, D.C. Why aren't those troops in his home city? So there's a lot of politicking here, to Rick's point. And I think the danger for the Trump administration politically is that polling-wise, this is, at least at this point, wildly unpopular. The American public, particularly independents, do not want armed troops on the nation's streets. But they do, to the terminal user's point, want to combat crime. And we should all want to do that. So hopefully there's a way they can work together to make this happen.
Great conversation with Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Thank you both for the insights. We will keep talking about this, something tells me, in the future. I want to mention a quick breaker here. Headline crossed the terminal a short time ago. We told you it was coming. Joni Ernst reports last week, now made official. The senator from Iowa says she will not seek re-election next year, and she's up with a video post making that formal announcement today. This is Bloomberg.
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Kriti Gupta in for Kaylee Lyons the next couple of weeks here in the nation's capital. Kriti just in from London with many questions about the stories that are unfolding here. Someday I'm going to have to ask you about what the conversations have been like in London against the backdrop of all the tariffs. Now we've got another court ruling that has brought us to another inflection point, and the markets are clearly not terribly happy. It's interesting. You hear a ruling like that, you think it would be market positive because markets seem to have an allergy to tariffs.
Yeah.
But it's the uncertainty that seems to be dogging the stocks.
It's the uncertainty, even if it's a penalty, even if it's a tariff, just having a number attached to it is a good thing. But you said, what's the thinking in London? Well, I think the thinking is quite similar to what it is here, which is, what is the thinking in Washington?
Just let us know when you know.
Exactly. And will we know?
Well, there's another thing we don't know a lot about, and that's whether they're going to come up with a funding mechanism for the government after the end of this month. If you ask Chris Murphy of Connecticut, you might wonder. He's suggesting that Donald Trump wants to see a shutdown and was on social media talking about this very thing. You can see it on Bloomberg TV and on YouTube. Trump is rooting for a shutdown, he writes. He knows he has created a huge problem because now any budget deal with Republicans isn't worth the paper it's written on, referring presumably to rescissions, among other things that have Democrats and Republicans not exactly getting along. Now, we bring all of this up because lawmakers are coming back into town today. It's fly-in day. And we wanted to spend some time with Mick Mulvaney, who's with us in our Washington studio right now. Former Republican congressman, co-founder of the Freedom Caucus, of course, former acting chief of staff in the first Trump administration. He ran OMB and has more titles than you can fit on the card. It's great to have you back in studio with us, sir. Welcome.
Pretty welcome. It's nice to see you.
I guess summer's officially over. Now we get to real business.
Is it? Does it go by Labor Day or do we go by the solstice?
I'm not sure how. Well, I think Labor Day in Washington.
Equinox. It's equinox. Right?
Yeah, right. But that doesn't really matter.
I don't think it
September 30 is what matters.
That's the end of the year.
I feel like it's up to me to start challenging the conventional wisdom.
Oh, go ahead.
When this many people say we're going to shut down, doesn't that mean we're not?
Generally, yes, in this town. And I actually did hear for the first time from a well-placed Republican that they really don't want to shut down.
Okay.
And they don't think there's going to be one. But I keep coming back again and again to a couple things. Number one, exactly what Murphy said, which is the environment is really, really nasty right now. Yeah. What was Chris really saying? Ignore the part about the president doesn't follow the law. That's just politics. But what he's saying is, look, we passed a spending bill on a bipartisan basis because it takes 60 votes, and then you rescinded on partisan lines. So we agreed to spending together as two parties, and then you rescinded that spending on partisan lines without any Democrats. And that does sort of make a Democrat wonder, why would I ever vote for another spending bill again as long as this president is around?
Sure.
And then you look at something I'm a little bit familiar with, which is executive authority goes up during a government shutdown, which is technically a lapse in funding. And the Office of Management and Budget is actually heavily involved in determining who is essential and non-essential, a term we're familiar with now in this town, right?
This is going to get interesting.
Oh, it is. So you can imagine Russ Vought, who listen, I'm so jealous of Russ. He's having a great time down there.
You're jealous.
Absolutely. I would love to be down there right now. This is fantastic. He sort of gets to sit back and say, okay, Greedy, you're essential. And we like what you're doing in the government. And Joe, you're non-essential. So goodbye. So it's really sort of a way to run the government without Congress's input. So I think they might want to shut down. But you're right. When everybody in this town says X, it's usually a good idea to vote Y. And right now, everybody's saying a shutdown.
Can you just walk us through the plumbing a little bit of the shutdown?
Maybe, but it usually puts people to sleep.
No. I'm coming in from London, and the thought in London is, shouldn't tariffs have fixed all the problems when it comes to the budget? Shouldn't the math have come and at least canceled out? Maybe not canceled out the entire deficit issues, the entire budget issues, but at least taken some of the pressure off. Is that any?
No, it's not even close.
But is it progress? Even if it's an ounce of progress, even if it's a drop in the bucket?
Well, it's more money. But I mean, look, I've heard Trump say the tariffs have brought in $7 trillion. No, it hasn't. What is it, $115 billion, I think is the number. We spent that much during lunchtime today. So, no, I don't think tariffs were never designed. They were never designed to plug a fiscal hole. Okay, it's good money. It's additional money. I get it. You and I have talked, Joe, before in the show about how we both thought inflation would go up. It hasn't. So look, it's hard to argue with the facts, and they've not contributed to inflation, and they have generated more government revenue. Period. End of story. No real debate as of right now. But it was never going to plug the fiscal hole to everybody. Washington would go, oh, it's great. We can start spending a bunch of money now. By the way, they just spend money anyway. They don't care about deficits. So whether or not it was plugged or not doesn't really make any difference. Just goes to show you the British are asking about the wrong things.
Okay, well, let's ask about motivations here.
Yeah.
Because it's really interesting what you just mapped out. If you're at the White House right now, you're saying, make my day, right?
Yeah.
Please shut down the government. We have a plan for that. And I wish you luck reopening the government.
Yeah.
We've had Democrats say, we might vote for a shutdown, but only if there's an off-ramp. There's no such thing with this White House, is there?
Not if they keep their keep in mind, when we went through the shutdown in late 2018 into 2019. We felt like we were doing a good job of managing the lapse in appropriations.
That was the record.
Which is what a shutdown. It was the longest shutdown ever. And, I think it's fair to say that, when a Republican is in charge of OMB, you can make a shutdown look very different than when a Democrat is in charge of OMB. The case in point, we kept the monuments open on the National Mall. The Obama administration during their shutdown, put up the barriers and said, if you don't like it, call Congress, right? So, we do feel like we're able to manage a lapse in appropriations. The only reason that we didn't keep it closed longer in 2019 was because we didn't have the support of the Republicans in the House and the Senate. We had Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell beating us up on us every single day saying we have to do something about the shutdown. You're not going to get that out of this Republican leadership. So, I think the more interesting question is, if it does shut down, how does it open? And I don't know the answer to that question.
What would the Trump administration want, though? What's the easiest thing to fix to get that shutdown off the radar?
I don't know if they want one. More rescissions.
Keep it close.
More. I mean, we saw one of the most fascinating things that no one paid attention to was this so-called pocket rescission just a couple days ago. It hasn't been done in a long time. We tried to push it in 2017 and 18 when I was at OMB. We couldn't get the White House counsel to go along with it. They've done it. It's a fascinating tool. Look, I think they want to spend less money, especially in things like USAID. They'd like to shut down those entire programs. Maybe that's what would open it up. But you tell me if a Democrat's going to vote to reopen a shutdown government as part of a deal to shut down a bunch of USAID programs permanently.
So the next rescissions package, or I guess the pocket rescission, that's a sure thing. Right? If we're daring you to shut down, then let's keep clawing back what we can, is the mentality of the White House.
So the logic is actually quite interesting. You want to talk about getting into the plumbing. An ordinary rescissions package, and I've done half a dozen of them, they got nowhere because what happens is they go to the Hill, and if Congress does nothing, they die. All right? Now, this time, Russ Vought sent one down a couple weeks back, maybe a couple months now, about $9.4 billion, and Congress did act and gave it the thumbs up, and that rescission actually kicked in. This pocket rescission is different. They've got some legal opinions that say, look, if we send you a rescission during the last 45 days of the congressional year, of the fiscal year, if you do nothing, Congress, the rescission is valid. So Congress would have to affirmatively act to undo the rescission. So it sort of flips it on its head when it comes to the last 45 days. It's similar in that fashion to, say, a pocket veto. if this holds, it's a tremendous tool, because what it means is that future administrations in the last 45 days of their administration can really claw back on spending unless Congress does something. And as we all know in this town, Congress is better at doing nothing than it is at doing something.
Is there a political cost to a government shutdown?
Never.
What does that look like?
Hardly ever. Everybody says it costs people votes, and I don't know of a single person who ever changes a vote based on maybe pollsters have got hard data. I don't remember. I've been through, I don't know, Joe, how long have we been here? 6 shutdowns since 2015? I can't remember.
Is that how we're measuring time now?
And I cannot remember a single time.
And Wall Street feels the same way, doesn't it? Because when you reopen the government, presumably someday everything goes right back. Everyone's made whole. Keep in mind, I think the best GDP quarter that the Obama administration ever had was the quarter that we had a big shutdown. Wow. So here we go.
Yeah.
Another rescissions package, another shutdown. Bring us inside the room.
I want to be Russ Vought when I grow up.
Bring us inside the room. We could connect you guys.
Yeah.
For the conversation with Donald Trump on a day like this, when the court says, nope, tariffs are illegal.
Yeah.
And then says, actually, some of these other things that you're doing, sending National Guard into L.A. was also illegal. Does the president sit back and say, okay, then, Mick, rewrite it so it's not illegal? Or does he take this as a defeat?
No, he never takes it as a defeat. He does. I thought you were going to say, does he say, let's challenge it at the next level?
Okay.
Because the answer to that question is both.
So yes to both.
He goes to one group and says, all right, so what's our argument at the appellate level, the next appellate level? I think the tariffs just came out of the federal court here in D.C., right? So that'll go to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Get ready on that. Mm-hmm. But in case we lose, what's our backup plan? So let's go back and find out our 232s. What other tools have we got? There's this one we're not familiar with, like a 122, which is a 15% for 150 days or something like that. There's all sorts of trade tools the president has, in addition to the ones under IEPA that just got shot down. So you can do both. We're going to continue to push on the court decisions all the way up to the Supreme Court. And at the same time, if we lose, we're going to start the process to see what we can do that can pass judicial muster.
Well, in terms of getting some of that other alternative sources of revenue, we've already talked about in the past couple of weeks this idea of getting, say, 15% of revenue from corporations as one example. How serious is he about expanding that use?
Sadly, I think he's serious about it. This whole government ownership of private companies, I think, is real. Really, really disappoints me. I'm not a big fan. You look up the definition of socialism in the dictionary, and it says, included government ownership of the means of production. And last time I checked, we now own the means of producing some chips. Right. So I'm not excited about it. I hope that there's somebody in the White House trying to make the president for the case that why this has always been a bad idea. It never works. But I'm not sure that those voices are really ascendant
to the White House. Who's telling him in the White House that this is a good idea? Would this have happened in the first administration? When you were criticizing Barack Obama for investing in government motors?
Yeah, and maybe we were just too close to it back then. Maybe there's a period of time and now people have forgotten that socialism is a bad thing. I have no idea. Do I think Peter Navarro is capable of making an argument that the government should own U.S. Steel, the government should own GM, the government should own Intel? Yeah, he probably is. But I mean, face it, you can't, as much as I beat up on Peter, and I'd be happy to do it all day long if you want me to, he can't be the only voice. There's got to be other voices in there saying, Mr. President, I think that's a really good idea.
Even Howard Lutnick suggested Lockheed Martin might be a target.
This is a private sector, why not? Man. Hey, why not? If we own, let's see, we own critical minerals now. Yeah. We own a piece of U.S. Steel. We own a piece of Intel. Why not? Why don't we own Boeing? Once you open this door, how do you close it? And that's my question to my Republican friends. Where's my camera? Over here. So when we finally lose control, and the Democrats are in charge, which always happens in this country, pendulums swing back and forth, and they want to go out and buy every solar energy. We thought lending money to Solyndra was a really bad idea. Ooh. How is it going to be when we own Solyndra? I mean, that's where we are going. Now we're arguing about not just even different levels of socialism. It's what are we going to buy? Yeah. If you're a Republican, you want to buy Lockheed Martin and Intel. If you're a Democrat, you want to buy Solyndra and whatever. I mean, this is who's the better socialist, not the difference. There's not much difference between the two parties at that level. That's why I'm so disappointed about it.
This has happened to me more often, Creedy, when people in the studio are looking directly to the camera to send a message directly to someone.
Yes,
and I'm wondering if is the president watching this thing now? Because
yes, he's out there someplace in television land watching me.
He's been responding from time to time, which is why I asked.
But my brother or the president?
The president, yeah.
My brother responds to me, President.
Oh, your brother. I thought you said your mother. All right, we'll keep it All in the family here, I guess, with Mick Mulvaney. Great to have you back.
He's a huge Bloomberg guy.
Well, I love that. Thank you for being
along. By the way, do you know that David Schweikert has a terminal in his office? He watches you guys every single day.
He's got a terminal.
Yeah.
Did you know that, producer James?
Yeah.
This is wow. How many members have terminals?
I think he may be the only one. I hope I didn't get him in trouble.
We buried the lead today.
Yeah.
This is good news. This is good
stuff. You guys have a direct line into the halls of power.
The former congressman and former acting chief of staff at the White House. Thank you for the insights as always, and don't be a stranger. With me here in Washington, Kriti Gupta will meet you for the late edition of Balance of Power, if you're ready to roll.
We're ready to roll.
Delighted to have you as part of the conversation. And by the way, that's at 5 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be after the president's announcement. So we'll have a lot more to talk about right here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg.
Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.